something.
But it's also interesting, again, how that ties back into A Place in the Sun, this movie from the 50s. And generally, when we think of movies from the 50s, everything is perfect, everything is pristine, and it's almost like...
It's not perfect in this movie, yeah.
Right.
And it's the first thing, and I want to say this because I know you're a film buff. It's an important movie because if when we were growing up, the greatest actor of Robert De Niro and Al Pacino and Christopher Walken and was it John Caviezel, the guy who died? Who's the guy from Godfather?
John Cazale. Yeah. John Cazale.
Yeah. John Cazale, yeah. Brilliant actors. They're all method actors. Harvey Keitel and the Scorsese thing, and they love Brando and they love James Dean. Those are their touchstones. And Brando loved Montgomery Clift. Like Montgomery Clift is really, if you follow, I was researched film history for a while too. That was another weird passion. I mean, he's like the first method actor, and that movies changed. Like in the movies, the way Hollywood worked, because it was, basically, you don't think about how young that industry was in the 20s and 30s. It's a brand new industry. It's only been around 20, 30 years, right? And people, and this is before the talkie started. It's like what, 1921 or 29? I mean, it's really fresh. And so the way the movies got portrayed, those old movies, it's so like stagecraft, right? Because it all comes from Broadway and stage. So the way they act in these movies is very like projecting. It's very like dramatic, and the dialogue is like, and it's just like the characters are so like over the top the way they speak. It doesn't seem honest. With A Place in the Sun, which is not the first of these movies, because Casablanca's like that too in some ways, but it's dark. Like it's a dark thing, and it's a real. And Montgomery Clift is playing a flawed character, and he's this lead man.
Right.
And I found that like I said, it must have been it's a book and a movie, but it must have been kind of shocking at the time because it's just like you didn't have your hero be a bad guy, like your hero's like, usually like the guy, he's like, Errol Flynn coming to save the day, but it's like this is a fractured guy. He talks like a real person, and I think that it's a powerful thing too. Like so, I think it all, like I said, it all works in one with the lyrics in the album because it's like that. So
well,
a little bit rap. I got.
No, because again, that sort of ties into Triggerman. Like when you guys came up as a band, it would have been very easy for Gavin to do a third incarnation of Carrie Nation. Like he literally, I mean, seriously, he really could have. And it's funny because this scene, great scene, but there was a time when all the bands kind of I remember you looking at like a flyer for like a listing of like these shows. And like Ice was playing, and you were like, dude, you guys should be higher up on the bill simply because everything from here on down is just kind of the same thing. And and it's interesting how, like, tying it back to A Place in the Sun, it's almost like the Triggerman of movies of the 1950s. Like, it doesn't really fit, like, when people talk about that time.
Yeah, that's a good analogy. I like it. I'm going to use that one. But I think with Triggerman, you understand, like, Gavin saw Minor Threat. Like, Gavin's been around. I never saw Minor Threat, but I was going to shows in 84, 85. So, like, and at the time, we were all into punk rock. Like, there wasn't a straight edge hardcore scene. There was, like, a punk and hardcore scene. Like, 7 Seconds would play with Aggression, and Exploited would headline, or whatever, GBH, or SNFU. Like, and then there was Uniform Choice, and then you got a straight edge band kind of on these bills. But only one. And what I think it got for Galvin, and definitely for me, is by the time we started Triggerman, it was just all straight edge hardcore bands. Like the scene was gone. Like people understand, because that's such a niche of another niche. Once it got solely into straight edge hardcore, it got smaller and got less sophisticated. And I'm not knocking any of these bands. I love all these bands, but I'm just saying it just became a one kind of opera. It's like, here you go, there's 5 bands who are all saying the same thing and all kind of just playing the same type of music. There's no punk in here anymore. There's nothing different, and it's boring. And I know Gavin was not interested in doing a band that sounded like that. I mean, I think we all really love Dag Nasty, and we kind of wanted to maybe go that direction more, like kind of like the Revolution Summer era Discord stuff. Looking back at it, I definitely done some things different in how we approached it. I didn't understand. I kind of half-assing it all the way, because it's like going to school, and now I'm going towards Quicksand, Rage Against the Machine, and now I'm doing Triggerman, and we would practice like once a week, and that's just, when you learn that Fugazi practiced 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, when they weren't touring like a job, and you're like, oh, well, oh, that's what you do. Like you take it, if you're gonna do this, you fucking do it. Like you're gonna do it. You got to put everything you got into it. You can't just go like, hey, practice. Oh, we got show Saturday. Let's practice on Tuesday. Like you got to bring it. And I think the music's really suffered too. And Triggerman is definitely part of that. Where it's just kind of like you got on a lot. There's a lot of bills where not all the bands were, you know, you're dealing with punk rock, so the equipment's never great, and it sounds like that Ice House where we all played all the time, like fucking brick warehouse. I mean, you couldn't have worse acoustics. No one, only Popeye could make that place sound good. You know, like the rest of it. I remember, like, if you look at these Triggerman videos, Brian Ballcheck sent me one from the Toe Jam, and all it is just like, it's just noise. I mean, it sounds awful.
Well, one thing I always enjoyed about the Triggerman shows is you never knew what you were going to get in terms of, like, the songs. Like, I never knew, like, what the song order was going to be. And also, I didn't know what was going to happen when you guys played. Like, there was some nights you would come on stage, and I almost sort of felt like you didn't want to really have any confrontation with the audience. You just wanted to go and play the damn songs and just perform. And then there were some nights where, like, I thought you kind of got up on stage, and, like, if Gavin broke a string, that's when you would kind of seize the moment, talk to the crowd.
Yeah, I mean, I was just new. I had never been in a band. Like, you're just figuring out. Like, looking back at it, I would have been a lot more, and any band should have done this, but Triggerman especially, we would have been a lot more regimented and focused and a lot more consistent. Because what you're saying is true. Some nights it was like, I was in this different groove, and I was using a mic stand, which I kind of was into, and then some nights I'm, like, telling jokes and, like, making, you know, changing the lyrics to be good. So and then, like, that's a little bit of insecurity too, I'm sure, like, because we were, I was, you know, Gavin was a bigger, you know, he was from No for an Answer and Carry Nation, so he carried the weight, and we always deferred to him, and he's a great leader. It's not like he did a bad job, but I wasn't able to flex, you know. Now I've obviously, the thing comes with age is wisdom. You look back at it, you're like, well, dude, like, we had so many ideas we never did. Like it would have been great to have been a little bit more hungrier and just pushed it more. Because the problem with Triggerman was we wanted to push it, but we also kind of played into the scene, and we knew the weirder we were getting, the less we were being accepted because it wasn't hardcore. But it's a weird thing. That's why I have so much reverence for Sensefield. Because when Sensefield started, they went out into LA and just played these shows in front of like 20 people, 30 people. They wouldn't touch the hardcore scene because it wasn't hardcore. And John and Chris and those guys were like, no, we're doing this type of band, and we're just going to do this, and we're going to be in, you know, like, and eventually they kind of came back into it through Revelation, but that takes fucking balls. We were doing the chicken shit way, which is like, well, we can play Grill Biscuits coming down, we can play that show because we're friends with those guys, but we weren't really wanting to do that kind of music. And I just wish, like, I go back, I would have just been like, no, let's push it, let's go into LA, let's play that way, let's get our live show a little bit more dialed out. Like, looking back at it now, that's what I was saying earlier, if we played live, I think Triggerman should have had visuals. I think Triggerman, like, it would have been great because we were all into editing, you and I, making these Andy movies and stuff. So, like, we had the capabilities. It would have been rad to do a projection behind us of, like, old movies and weird shit and dark imagery and kind of darken the light and kind of change the aesthetic of our set so that it was more of an experience and we could get away with playing more slow, mid-tempo songs without people going like, can't stay inside of this, you know.
When I was doing the research for this, listening to Dead Like Me, I forgot listening to Insulate and Gun in the Hand that John Bunch sings on those.
Yeah.
When you hear that now,
Gun in the Hand, I can't listen to that song.
I was just about to ask, like, so when you listen, like, what?
The song's about suicide.
Right.
The song's about suicide, and John Bunch is singing it, like,
right.
It's haunting. Yeah, I mean, I love John Bunch's voice, and we were really tight then, and me and Gavin went to, the two bands we saw so much of were Rage Against the Machine and Sensefield, because Rage Against the Machine is playing in LA, like, I felt like once a week, and both bands flew us away for different reasons, like, but we were up there, me and Gavin constantly, he would drive, pick me up, my mom's, and we would be in LA watching either Sensefield or Rage or, you know, some other bands like, you know, Underground. Wool, we loved Wool, so we'd go see that a lot. But we're talking about John Bunch.
Yeah. Kind of like the haunting sort of.
Yeah. So I'm sorry, I got sidetracked. But John Bunch. That's why. But the problem is I love John Bunch's voice. He was gracious enough because I have limitations in my vocal range, and I kind of like. What I think is good about this Triggerman record is by now I know where I'm at vocally. I can sit in like the space. I can work around the space, and I know what to do in it. So it sounds a lot better. In Triggerman, I tried to do things in the early days that I couldn't pull off, and I felt we needed another singer on some of the stuff to kind of, like John Bunch singing those songs would be like fucking amazing.
He sings great on that record. Like it's sort of like a cameo, like in a movie, like for when he comes on, but it's amazing.
And I've always done that. Like so since then I've done that. So like when we put that Learning to Lie record out, I got Jeff Pizzotti from Naked Raygun to do a song, and Naked Raygun's one of my favorite bands of all time. And so like to me, I was just like, this is great. I have two records. I have John Bunch on one, is great, and then have Jeff Pizzotti. So on this new Triggerman record, besides the choir, we got Matt from the Bronx, which is one of my favorite bands, and Matt and me are dear friends. He's my favorite guy. He sings on a song called Long Way Down, and then we were able to get Peter Kortner from Dag Nasty Field Day to do a song called Dissolve, and he does some vocals at the very end, but just little things. And it's just kind of a thing, you know what I mean? Like if there's ever another Triggerman record, there will be at least one guest performance. It's kind of not expected. It doesn't really tie into what we're doing. Like Jeff Pizzotti from Naked Raygun on a Triggerman record. And now looking back, I'm so happy John's on Dead Like Me, because like John Bunch sings on a Triggerman record. Yeah, it seems like 2 songs, and he crushes it. Right. Well, and then with this, like the Peter Kortner stuff, I mean, Matt's great, but Pete Kortner's like a vocal hero of mine, because I just think I love him. I think he's the best Dag Nasty vocalist, and the reason he is because his voice has some vulnerability to it, and it comes across as very honest. Not to say that Smalley doesn't come across as honest, but Smalley didn't write the lyrics, the songs, or the melodies, so those are Baker songs. So you're just
but Smalley sang them like he did.
Yeah, he did. Oh, dude, it's a classic record. I'm not knocking it. I'm just saying, but with Peter, he like wrote lyrics and he wrote melodies, and there's a vulnerability to it. So when I wrote the song, it just was. I could tell I was ripping his vocal style, because it was so like there's parts where I'm like, man, it sounds like Pete Kortner, and then I'm like, well, I know him. He should just do it, because and it's a very sad song. It's a pretty autobiographical song in some ways. It's about like kind of being older and like, like, all right, like now what, and so like you're literally looking back at your life and like kind of realizing like, like time's not on your side much anymore, so you're like missing out on like things you should have done, like and I think Pete, we think alike like that. So he crushes that song. But yeah, that's kind of the thing. I love having like a guest vocalist on it. I just think it's just, and I think it's cool to have like Derek O'Brien sings harmonies on this. I think it's good to like have other voices in there helping you, because it can get, it just breaks it up. It makes it more dynamic to like have all of a sudden a different type of voice and stuff.
Is it fair to say that second record?
Well, the sun just came through the window.
Yeah, I know. I'm seeing it. Is it fair to say that on that second record, I sort of look at that as sort of Triggerman's kind of southern record? Is it fair to say that it kind of has a little bit of that happening?
The Learning to Lie record?
Yeah.
I never looked at it like that. I mean, you have to say Learning to Lie, like I said, those songs are old songs, and the lyrics for the most part are old lyrics. I had to change some of them. I was going through a breakup, so I kind of threw in some modernized it, Learning to Lie, and stuff like that. It's hard to me, but for the most part, they're older songs. So I never looked at it that way. I just knew. I know it's mellow. It's a weird record because it's it's like basically like demos. It's from different parts of Triggerman's era. Like even your sevens we put out a ringside.
Right.
I didn't want those songs to be on the record. So I'm like, we did these songs. That just came out, like Flux and Desolation Angel. There's no reason to put them out, but Gavin was like, no, I want to re-record them. I want them to be like sound better, so we record those like on a 4-track. And Gavin was
You did them on a 4-track. You gave me the 4-track, and I took it and had it mastered. And
good for you. I mean, I don't know why we did it. That's the thing about the guy. I was at Ignite, and that first demo, like I think about that all the time. Like we did the fucking demo on a 4-track in Brett's closet. It's so raw, and put that out in the world. Like, why didn't we just go to a studio and just do a fucking demo for like we recorded the fucking thing in 2 days? Could have gone to a studio and just done it. I just don't. I don't know. Those are the things you wish you could go back and go like, whoa, man, like you could do better.
Now, with that,
I'm just gonna move this to the light.
Okay.
crushing it. All right.
With this second record, and we're kind of coming to probably, we've been
talking, dude.
We've been going for over an hour. Don't worry, we're almost.
It's like Triggerman album. It's gonna be a 4-hour conversation.
Oh, it's gonna be great.
All things Triggerman.
I'm debating in my mind: do I put this all up as one thing, or do I break it into chunks? Because if I break it into chunks, they're gonna be long chunks. So,
you do whatever you need to do. I'm just you need to wait. It's your show. You're the host. However you want to do it.
No, it's I'm just looking at that record, and honestly, and I think you would agree, this isn't, I think anyone that's been following the band would agree with this. The current record would not exist if it was not for this second record, because I remember talking to you about this, and you were playing me Bleeder, and Bleeder sounded so different than from when you guys initially did it.
Yeah.
And I remember just saying to you, like, you guys just don't care anymore, but like in a good way. And you're like, yeah, dude, what do we have to care about?
I mean, I think when me and Gavin got back together to do that Learning to Lie record, that was something we always talked about. It was frustrating because we just didn't put out a second album. We had the material, like and no one was really interested in doing that, and we should have just done it ourselves. Like it's just there's all these things you think about, but we also should have toured. Like we had a U.S. tour book. With like Shelter and Into Another and all these great bands that we bailed on because we just were like, oh, we can't go on tour. I got to go to class. So all these mistakes you made, we always wanted to get back together and do that record, try to make a record. We talked about it quite a bit. And then once we did become friends with Derek O'Brien, who plays in Drums and Social Distortion, DI, and has his own studio, like I said. And he recorded some Killing Flame stuff, which is another band me and Gavin had done. And so we went to him and we're like, hey, man, if we recorded Triggerman thing, would you play drums? Would you play drums on this, right? And he was like, yeah, of course, I'd love to. I'm like, okay, that's cool because he's a great drummer and he's got a studio. And then originally we wanted Brian Howell, the original bass player, to be in there. That unfortunately, that didn't work out, and it's no fault of Brian. We just kind of, I don't want to say anything. I love Brian, and I don't want to, but he just didn't work out. Like, I just didn't feel like he was ready to record when it was time to record, and I don't know why that is, but he just didn't feel like he had the songs down, even the old songs, and that made us nervous because we were paying for this ourselves. It wasn't for free. So I knew Brett Rasmussen from Ignite, who's an amazing bass player, and professional musician. So I just was like, I had to let my good friend who was part of this band go, which sucks because he was upset, and rightfully so, and it's a shitty thing to fucking do, to be like, hey man, I know you're part of this band, but you can't be on this new thing. It's just like, fucking sucks. But once Brett was in the band and Brett and Derek were locked in together, we were just like, oh, dude, like, these songs are going to be sick because these guys can fucking play. Like, Brett and Derek together, it's just like.
Was that similar to when you got Popeye and Kevin in the band, kind of?
Kind of, but I will say this, as much as I love Kevin Murphy, like, he was a little loose on drums. Like he's a great drummer, he's interesting, but, like, he was a little loose. We don't practice a lot. Popeye's obviously super talented. I loved having that lineup because Popeye would do second guitar and vocals and stuff, and I thought that was probably the strongest we were live. But it was it's just one of those things. Once you got like these guys who are like pros and talking music, me and Gavin don't speak the language of music. Like what is it again? A minor to and like Derek and Brett are just like riffing on their musicians, and so like we're like, oh shit, this is gonna go like clockwork. And then that foundation I thought was really great. But the problem with that record, like I'm saying, is that it's because it was recorded in parts. It's like different eras. It doesn't seem cohesive. I mean, it's a cool record. It's obviously recorded all at the same time, so that makes sense. But like, there's the Go-Go's cover in there.
Right.
There's these old demos like 1 Minute Wonder and stuff, and then your 7 inches in there, and then there's like these kind of unfinished songs like Follow You and stuff that we had that we kind of finished. So I felt like it was kind of like a hodgepodge, almost like a compilation of like 7 inches. And with this new record, that's why we were excited to write it, because it was like, we're going to write this from scratch. I guess this isn't old stuff. This is like brand new, Triggerman stuff.
Well, to take it back to movies, you have Dead Like Me, which is like a very original album. And then, so the follow-up to, most original movies, any director's follow-up, generally the second movie isn't as good. It shows some of the promise, but it just...
Yeah.
And then the third movie is like, okay, this is why we came, because of the first. And so, I don't know, maybe it ties all back to A Place in the Sun.
It took us 30 years. It took us 30 years to get to the third movie. You know? Well, I think you're right, because I feel like with this now, it's like I said, there was such a freedom to it because there's confidence. And like, you know, me and Gavin finished this record and I was like, I actually feel like a real musician for the first time in my life doing this record with you. And he was just like laughing. It's like, oh yeah, it's like, it's complicated. The arrangements are complicated. It's not like, there's some hardcore structures in there, and you'll hear things like that, but there's some jam parts. I mean, it gets spatial. There's a lot of atmospheric. Like, if you listen to it with headphones, especially, it's mixed for headphones intentionally, because I kind of figure everyone's got these now, and they're going to listen to their phone. So that's how we tried to mix it, so that sounds like swirl, like guitars come from right to left, and pan, while like there's a keyboard sound going one way. It's very ambitious. It's a very ambitious record. I'm stoked on it. Like, and I feel like I said, I feel really flattered that people have heard it and been like, oh, this is fucking cool. And this is really interesting. And like, you know, if nothing else, like Dan said, I saw O'Mahony post on Facebook. It's like, at least we're going for something. It's a conversation piece. Like, okay, like you might hate it, but at the same time, it's like, well, these guys took a swing.
Well, to sort of leave you and to sort of just end on this thought, you know, you said that you were, you know, you guys were kind of thinking in the mixes and stuff like that for, you know, the ear pods and stuff like that. What were you thinking about when you did Dead Like Me, or even the Triggerman demos? You were thinking about a car.
I wasn't really thinking about anything because I wasn't savvy with the recording. I was thinking about trying to write songs. I didn't understand, you know, like the production value. Like we recorded Dead Like Me at West Beach Studio which is Brett Gerwitz's studio. Great studio. But we recorded that at a different time, and I wasn't even thinking like that, because it was like, these are songs we demo, we play live. I'm just trying to make them sound like that. Like this type of record, I understand recording process way better. I understand like what devices people are listening to. Like I'm conscious of that at least. And there's no live agenda, and there's no real like, okay, man, like I said, like we have the luxury of not being a band that's just going to make a concept record, because it doesn't matter if it hurts us or else. It's like we're just having fun. So we've come a long way, and we're, you know, in our development as like songwriters, Gavin and I, because and this is all part of the puzzle, because I would never have thought making Dead Like Me, like, how are people listening to this music? And to your point, oh, it's going to be through a car, so let's like listen to the mix in the car. It's like, I wasn't even thinking like that.
Well, I just remember when Farside was recording Rochambeau, like Jim Monroe, like giving them a mix like on a tape and saying, listen, go and listen to this in the car, because if this sounds good in the car, it's going to sound good everywhere.
Yeah. Jim Monroe's you know, he's a great producer. And
or it may have been E.
well, whatever. I'm just saying, like, that makes sense, because Jim would think like that, and so would, you know, Popeye and Rob Hayworth were sophisticated musicians for the time, so they would have thought. I would think they would think like that. Like, we were just like, you know, I guess we would go listen to it in the, you know, Donald Cameron, who recorded Triggerman, we would go listen to mixes in the car. I mean, that did happen. I never looked at I just figured that was the easiest way to listen to. Like, oh, just go to your car and listen to this. I never thought, like, this is how it should sound. But it makes sense that Jim would do that.
Remember that one night we were in Santa Ana, my car broke down, and I really wanted you to give me that Triggerman tape, and you said that you would, and then you threw it against the wall?
No, I don't remember that. It sounds like something I would do, though.
A few bands later, Carrie Nation took the stage. Shortly after that, Judge, a band from New York, took the stage. Andrew and I left a few songs into their set. As I was leaving, Nelson introduced me to Greg Brown, Scott Sundahl, Paul T., and other members of a group known as the Orange County Sloth Crew. Eventually, they would nickname me Mushnik, which was a character I had been in a high school play. On the ride home, I had no idea that those people I had just met would become and would be the gateway to the best friends I would ever have.